Rancher lived alone with his animals, until a traveler offered him a place to stay, only if they share. The rancher lived alone. For as long as anyone in the nearby town could remember, he had been by himself on his wide open land. The house was old but strong, made of rough timber that had weathered many storms. Base smoke often curled from the chimney in the morning as he brewed his coffee in the small kitchen. He liked the quiet of his home, the steady rhythm of life that was guided by the rising and setting sun, the feeding of animals, and the fixing of fences. There was no neighbors close enough to call for casual visits, no bustling streets, and no busy towns nearby. Just him, the animals, and the land. And for him, that was enough. He started his days early. Before the sun touched the horizon, he was already outside, walking through the pastures to check on the animals. The horses were always the first. He loved their strength, their gentle eyes, and the way they could sense his mood without a word. He had a favorite horse, a tall brown mare with a soft white mark on her forehead. Psst. She would nuzzle his hand as he gave her the morning feed. The cattle were next. They needed water, food, and sometimes a little gentle encouragement to move from one pasture to another. The dogs followed him everywhere. There were 3 of them now, old companions who had stayed by his side through storms and winters. They were loyal, quiet, and smart enough to know what work needed to be done. Life on the ranch was not easy. It required strength, patience, and persistence. The fences needed constant repair. Gates had to be oiled so they wouldn't squeak, and the barns had to be cleaned. Sometimes storms would hit unexpectedly, tearing parts of the fence or leaving branches scattered across the fields. On those days, the rancher would work from dawn to dusk, soaked to the skin and exhausted by evening, but he never complained. The land was his life, and he felt proud of what he had built and maintained with his own hands. Even though he lived alone, he never felt lonely. His animals were his family. He talked to them, often aloud, as if they could understand every word. "Easy there," he would say to a nervous horse. "You'll be all right." Or, "Don't wander too far," he'd call to the cows. Sometimes, when the wind blew gently through the trees or the sun shone on the hills, he would stop and simply watch. Watching the world around him, he felt a calm that only those who live close to the land can know. It was a quiet, steady happiness. Yet, there were moments when he felt the faintest tug of loneliness. On evenings when the sky turned golden and then deep purple, he would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and listen to the quiet. The occasional distant sound of a car or a bird flying overhead reminded him that there was a larger world out there. Sometimes he imagined what it would be like to have another person around. But these thoughts were brief. He pushed them aside, reminding himself that he was content. He liked his independence, the peace, and the ability to make decisions without anyone else's interference. That was how he had always lived. One morning he woke to a cold wind sweeping across the pastures. The frost had kissed the ground overnight, turning the grass into sparkling blades that crunched underfoot. He wrapped his old coat tighter around his body and stepped outside, his boots sinking slightly into the frozen earth. He moved first to the barn to check on the animals. The horses were calm, their breaths visible in the chilly air. The cattle huddled together, waiting for him to bring their food. The dogs barked once, happy to see him awake. This was a typical morning, one of thousands he had experienced, yet he never took it for granted. Every day required his attention, his effort, and his care. As he went about his chores fixing a loose plank on the fence, he noticed something unusual in the distance. Along the dusty path that led to his ranch, a figure was moving slowly toward him. At first he thought it might be a delivery driver, or someone lost. but there were no roads that led to his house except the narrow track he himself used. He squinted, shading his eyes from the rising sun. It was a person. A traveler. By. Someone was walking toward his home. He felt a mix of curiosity and caution. But visitors were rare. Strangers even rarer. He wiped his hands on his coat and called out, "Hey, who's there?" The figure stopped and waved slightly. The rancher stepped down from the fence, his heart beating a little faster than usual. He did not like surprises, but he also did not want to be rude. He was a man who respected honesty and courage. The traveler was bold enough to walk all this way alone, which earned a small measure of his attention. When the traveler reached him, he could see that it was a young person, carrying a small backpack. Their clothes were worn but clean, and they had a calm, polite smile on their face. "Hello," the traveler said softly. "I'm looking for a place to rest for a few days. I've been traveling for a long time, and I heard there might be someone here who could help me." There was no deceit in their tone, only a quiet honesty. The rancher studied them for a long moment. He did not often let strangers in, but something about this person seemed different. There was a sincerity in their eyes that reminded him of the animals, trustworthy, gentle, and true. He felt a flicker of hesitation. Could he let this person into his world? His routine, his life of solitude depended on him alone. But another person would change that forever. The traveler seemed to sense his hesitation. They spoke again. "I don't want to be a burden. I'm willing to work, help with chores, anything you need."
"I just need a place to stay for a while." That simple statement struck a chord in him.
He had never had anyone offer to work alongside him with honesty and respect. Most people wanted favors or expected something in return. This traveler was different. They were asking for nothing but an opportunity to contribute. He remained silent for a moment, considering. Then he nodded slowly. "Death, all right," he said. "You can stay, but you'll have to work. Everything here requires effort, and I don't have time to babysit anyone. Prime." The traveler's face brightened, not with arrogance, but with relief. They nodded eagerly. "Of course, I understand." And just like that, an unusual partnership began. The traveler followed him to the house, where he showed them the basics: the bedroom, the kitchen, and the simple bathroom. They were quiet, respectful, and careful not to touch anything without asking. The rancher watched them closely. There was something almost childlike about their wonder at the old furniture, the animals, and the open sky beyond the windows. But there was also a maturity that promised reliability. He could tell they were serious about staying, about earning their place, and about respecting the life he had built. As the morning turned into afternoon, he showed the traveler the first chores: feeding the chickens, checking the water troughs, and helping gather hay for the animals. The traveler stumbled a few times, dropping a bucket or stepping on the wrong rope. But they laughed at their mistakes, and the rancher could not help but feel a small sense of amusement.
It was refreshing to see someone approach life with such humility and determination.
The rancher realized as he watched them work that life might be about to change, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, meaningful way. For the first time in many years, he would not be alone. He would have someone to share the days, the work, and perhaps even the stories with. It was a strange feeling, one that made him slightly uneasy but also curious. Could he really allow someone into his world? Could he trust them with the small, precise rhythm of his life? By evening, the traveler had learned a lot, and the animals seemed to accept them without hesitation. The dogs wagged their tails and nudged the traveler's hand. The horses watched calmly, and even the cattle seemed content. The rancher felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was relief. Perhaps it was the simple joy of seeing a friendly face after so many years of solitude. Whatever it was, it felt good. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple, the rancher and the traveler sat on the porch together, sipping coffee. They did not speak much. Words were not necessary. The sound of the animals moving in the fields, the rustle of the wind through the trees, and the quiet beauty of the ranch was enough. For the first time in a long while, the rancher felt that perhaps life had more to offer than just work, just routine, and just solitude. Perhaps it also offered connection, trust, and companionship. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that tomorrow would bring more challenges, more work, and perhaps more lessons. But for now, he simply watched the sky, listened to the quiet, and felt the subtle shift in his life. Something new had arrived at the ranch, something that might just change everything. The morning after the traveler arrived, the rancher woke before the sun as usual. The cold air carried the smell of dew and earth, and the animals were already stirring in their pens and pastures. The traveler was awake too, quietly preparing to help with the morning chores. The rancher watched them for a moment, but their movements were careful, almost deliberate, but not clumsy. It reminded him again of the unusual nature of this visitor. They seemed willing, ready, and determined to earn their place, but also respectful of the rhythm of the ranch. Coffee first?" the rancher asked, holding up a steaming mug. The traveler nodded with a small smile. They took the mug in their hands and inhaled the aroma. "Thank you," they said simply. But no complaints, no expectations, just appreciation. The rancher found himself nodding in approval. It was rare to find someone so patient and willing to learn, and he felt a tiny flicker of hope. Once breakfast was over, they stepped outside together. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of cold that makes your lungs feel alive and your mind sharp. Today, the rancher decided to introduce the traveler to the more difficult tasks, feeding the horses, checking the fences, and preparing the hay for the cattle. The traveler's face lit up with determination. "You'll need to learn fast," the rancher said, handing them a bucket of grain. "The animals won't wait for you to get used to this life. They need food, water, and care every day." The traveler nodded, adjusting the strap of their backpack. "I understand. I'm ready," they replied. Their sincerity was clear, and the rancher felt a small sense of relief. Perhaps this trial would work, after all. They worked together, side by side. The traveler learned quickly, though not without mistakes. They spilled some grain, dropped a bucket, and tripped over a fence post. Each time the rancher corrected them, not harshly, but firmly. "Careful there," he would say. "The horses can sense fear or hesitation. You need to be steady." The traveler listened, absorbing every word, and tried again. Slowly, steadily, they improved. As they worked, the rancher found himself talking more than he usually did. He told the traveler stories of his youth, how he had inherited the ranch from his father, how he had faced storms, droughts, and lonely winters, and how the animals had been his companions through it all. The traveler listened intently, occasionally asking questions. Grasp. They didn't interrupt, didn't judge, and didn't try to impose their opinions. They simply listened, and in that simple act, they earned the rancher's trust. By mid-morning, the chores were well underway. The horses were fed and watered, the cows were grazing peacefully, and the dogs had run off to chase birds in the field. The traveler was exhausted but satisfied. "It's harder than I imagined," they admitted, wiping sweat from their forehead. The rancher nodded. It's not easy, but it's honest work. You've done well so far. Keep going, and you'll learn the rhythm of it all. After a short break, the rancher decided it was time to show the traveler the barn and storage areas. He opened the doors and stepped inside, the smell of hay and animals greeting them. This is where we keep most of our supplies, he explained. You'll need to know where everything is. Narration. When the weather turns bad or the animals get sick, there's no time to search.
The traveler nodded, carefully noting the location of every tool, bucket, and sack of feed.
Narration. They moved with care, handling everything as if it were precious. As the day went on, the traveler began to find their own rhythm. They learned to anticipate the animals' needs, to balance the weight of the buckets, and to move quickly without startling the horses. The rancher watched quietly, impressed. He had expected someone new to slow things down or make more mistakes. But this person was different. They were learning, adapting, and working hard. He felt a flicker of pride in something he hadn't felt in years. Companionship! During the afternoon, the rancher decided to test the traveler's resourcefulness. He handed them a small repair task, a section of fence that had come loose in the last windstorm. Fix this, he said. Use what you have. I'll check back in a while. The traveler studied the fence, examined the materials, and got to work. They struggled at first, unsure of which nails to use and how to secure the posts, but they kept trying. After several attempts, the fence was sturdy and neat. The rancher returned and nodded. Well done.
You thought it through and made it work. That's more than I expected.
The traveler smiled, exhausted but proud. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, the rancher and the traveler sat on the porch, their tasks completed for the day. The traveler spoke softly, almost in awe.
It's beautiful here.
I've never seen a place like this, where every day is so connected to life and nature. The rancher nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. This land has taught me everything I know. It's hard work, but it's honest and rewarding. Breath. That evening, over a simple meal of stew and bread, the traveler made a request. I want to stay longer, they said. Bah, I feel like I can learn more, help more, and be a part of this life. I don't want to overstep. The rancher looked at them carefully. He had never considered having someone stay permanently. He had grown used to being alone, to managing everything himself, but something in the traveler's tone, in their humility and willingness, touched him. You'll have to earn it, he said slowly. This life isn't easy. It demands time, effort, and respect. If you want to stay, you'll need to work, share the chores, and follow the rules of this ranch. No complaints, no laziness. Do you understand? The traveler nodded eagerly. Yes. I understand completely. From that moment, their partnership took on a deeper meaning. It wasn't just about temporary help or passing curiosity. It was about trust, learning, and shared responsibility. The rancher found himself explaining not only the practicalities of ranch life, but also the small, quiet philosophies that had guided him for years. The animals teach you patience, he said one evening. The land teaches you respect. And the work teaches you humility. You have to accept it, or it will break you. Brask. The traveler listened intently, often repeating back what they had learned, sometimes asking questions, always eager to understand. They helped with the cleaning of barns, learned to ride the horses with confidence, and even assisted with milking the cows. Every day, their skills grew, and the rancher began to rely on them in ways he hadn't expected. The balance of work and shared effort became a rhythm, a pattern that brought stability and subtle joy into his life. One afternoon, as they were repairing a fence near the edge of the pasture, a sudden storm rolled in. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a sharp wind began to blow. Rain started falling in thick drops, soaking the ground and making the work more difficult. The traveler hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. The rancher looked at them and shouted over the wind, "Keep moving! Don't let the storm stop you! Animals depend on us." Together, they worked through the rain, securing the fence and protecting the animals. The traveler learned to stay calm under pressure, to think quickly, and to act decisively. When the storm passed, the rancher looked at them with a newfound respect. "You did well," he said simply. "You handled that better than I expected. You're learning more than just chores. You're learning responsibility." As the sky cleared and the sun began to peek out from behind the clouds, they both stood back and surveyed the pasture. The fence was repaired, the animals were safe, and the ranch was intact. The traveler was drenched but smiling, proud of what they had accomplished. The rancher felt a quiet satisfaction. For the first time in many years, he realized that having someone else there didn't just lighten his work, it changed his perspective on life. That night, after drying off and having a warm meal, the rancher and the traveler sat together on the porch once more. They didn't need to speak much. The shared experience of the day, the work, the storm, the learning, had created a silent understanding between them. The rancher felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this partnership could last. Perhaps this traveler, this stranger, could become a part of his life in a way that was meaningful and lasting. And so, as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, the rancher allowed himself to imagine a future that was not entirely solitary. The traveler had arrived unexpectedly, but their presence had opened a door he didn't even know existed. A door to shared life, shared effort, and perhaps, in time, shared friendship, or something more. For now, he would take it one day at a time, teaching, guiding, and observing. The traveler had proven themselves capable, respectful, and willing to learn. That was more than enough to start, and as he looked at them sitting quietly beside him, he realized that the ranch, his life, and even his heart might not feel so empty anymore. The next morning, the rancher woke to the familiar sound of roosters crowing and the wind whispering through the trees. The traveler was already outside, moving among the animals as if they belonged there, and for a moment the rancher paused at the doorway, quietly observing. They had come a long way in just a few days, and the change was remarkable. Where yesterday they had stumbled over small tasks, today they moved with purpose, confidence, and care. Despairs. The morning chores began like any other. The traveler fed the chickens, refilled the water troughs, and checked the fences. The rancher walked behind them, offering advice when necessary but largely allowing them to take the lead. It was strange for him to let someone else handle things on the ranch, even in small ways, but he found himself trusting them. They were careful, respectful, and willing to listen. And most importantly, they did not complain. As they worked, the traveler asked questions. "Why do you check the fences so often?" they asked. "Why not just once a week?" The rancher smiled faintly, wiping sweat from his brow. "A fence is like a promise," he said. "It keeps the animals safe, protects them from harm, and keeps trouble out. If one weak spot goes unnoticed, it can cause a lot of problems. Life on a ranch is full of small responsibilities that add up. You have to pay attention every day." The traveler nodded, absorbing every word. It was clear that they wanted to understand not just the how, but the why of ranch life. The rancher felt a strange sense of pride. Teaching someone who truly wanted to learn reminded him of when he had been young, learning from his father. It brought back memories of patience, guidance, and the satisfaction of seeing someone succeed. By late morning, the sun was high and the work had taken its toll. The traveler wiped their face, laughing lightly at a clumsy stumble with a bucket of water. The rancher chuckled, a rare sound that carried warmth. "You're learning," he said.
And that's all that matters. Mistakes are part of it. Bah.
Just don't give up. Barash. The traveler began noticing the small details of the ranch, the way the horses would gather near the barn at certain times, how the dogs seemed to understand every movement of the cattle, and even how the wind shifted across the fields at different hours. They asked questions, observed patterns, and slowly began to anticipate the needs of the ranch, sometimes before the rancher even spoke. This impressed him more than he expected. That afternoon, the rancher decided to teach the traveler about riding the horses properly. He chose a calm, gentle horse, one that had been patient with him for years. "Riding isn't just about sitting on the horse," he explained. "It's about trust, balance, and communication. The horse can sense your feelings. You have to be steady, confident, and kind." The traveler listened carefully, adjusting their posture, holding the reins lightly but firmly, and following his instructions. The first few attempts were awkward. The traveler lost balance, shifted too sharply, and startled the horse. Each time the rancher guided them back, explaining what to do differently. "Feel the movement," he said. "Don't fight it. Work with it." Slowly, the traveler found the rhythm, their movements becoming smoother, their confidence growing. By the end of the lesson, they were riding with ease, and even the horse seemed calm and comfortable with them. The rancher nodded silently, impressed by their determination and adaptability. As the day wore on, the bond between the two strengthened further. They shared meals in the small kitchen, washing dishes together and laughing at small mishaps. The traveler asked about the rancher's past, about his family, and about how he came to live alone in this vast, quiet land. The rancher spoke carefully, sharing memories of his father, the hardships he had faced, and the reasons he had chosen solitude. The traveler listened, never interrupting, and sometimes offered gentle observations that made him pause and think. However, life on a ranch is never without challenges. One evening, just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, a sudden cry from the field reached their ears. One of the cows had slipped near the edge of the pasture, caught in the soft ground by the stream. The rancher ran toward it, calling for the traveler to follow. Together they worked to free the animal. The traveler held the rope, steadying it as the rancher guided the cow carefully. It was difficult work, requiring strength, patience, and calm. The cow struggled, but they stayed steady, and after what felt like an eternity, the animal was free. Both were exhausted, their clothes soaked in sweat and dirt, but the rancher felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He looked at the traveler, who was panting but smiling. "Did well," he said quietly. "You stayed calm, followed instructions, and helped save the animal." Barash. That's exactly what this life is about. Staying calm, thinking ahead, and working together. The traveler's eyes shone with pride.
"I never thought I could do something like that," they admitted. "Thank you for trusting me."
The rancher nodded. Trust was slowly becoming something he was willing to share, and it felt good. The next few days continued in a similar rhythm, but now with subtle lessons about responsibility, observation, and care. The rancher allowed the traveler more freedom to take initiative, feeding the animals, checking fences, and tending the fields, while still guiding them when necessary. He began to notice small improvements, subtle but meaningful, in how the traveler moved, thought, and responded to challenges. They were not only learning the physical work of the ranch, but also the deeper understanding of its rhythms and needs. One morning, while they were repairing a section of fence near the creek, the traveler noticed a branch had fallen into the water, creating a small blockage. Without waiting for instructions, they used rocks and smaller branches to guide the water flow back, preventing damage to the pasture. The rancher stopped, leaning on his tool, watching quietly. When the traveler finished, he said simply, "You've learned more than I thought you would. You're beginning to understand how everything is connected here. Well done." The traveler's confidence grew with each task. They began to anticipate problems, suggest solutions, and even take small steps to improve efficiency around the ranch. The rancher found himself smiling more often, feeling less burdened, and even enjoying their company in ways he had not anticipated. It was as if a window had opened in his world, allowing light, energy, and life into a place that had been quiet for too long. One afternoon, while gathering hay, the traveler stumbled upon a sick lamb hiding in the tall grass. Its small body shivered, and it was clearly weak. The traveler called for the rancher, who quickly assessed the situation. Together they brought the lamb inside, cleaned it, and provided it with warmth and food. Over the next few days they cared for the lamb, monitoring its progress carefully. The traveler learned about illness in animals, proper care, and the patience required to nurse them back to health. The rancher watched quietly as the traveler developed a gentle touch, a careful approach, and a growing understanding of the needs of the animals. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of partnership, not just someone helping with work, but someone sharing the responsibilities, challenges, and triumphs of life on the ranch. It was a subtle yet profound change. As the sun set one evening, the rancher and the traveler sat on the porch together drinking water and watching the animals settle in the fields. The rancher broke the silence. "Best. You've done well," he said softly. "Better than I expected." Breath. "You're learning more than just work. You're learning life here. That's not easy for anyone." But Traveler smiled, looking at the horizon. "I never imagined I'd learn so much in just a few days."
You've taught me patience, responsibility, and how to care for life in ways I never knew existed.
The rancher felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time, he realized that sharing his world with someone else did not diminish it. Instead, it enriched it. The traveler had brought new energy, insight, and companionship. They had proven themselves capable, willing, and trustworthy. And slowly, quietly, the rancher began to consider the possibility of letting someone into his life permanently. That night, as the stars appeared above the ranch, he lay awake in his bed, thinking about the days that had passed. He remembered how lonely he had felt, how heavy the work sometimes was, and how limited his perspective had become by living alone. But now, with the traveler's presence, he felt a subtle shift, a lightness, a connection, and a hope he had not allowed himself in years. Tomorrow, he thought, would bring new challenges. There would be more chores, more lessons, and perhaps new surprises. But he was no longer alone in facing them. The traveler had proven that they were not just willing to work. They were willing to share life on the ranch, in all its difficulty and beauty. And that, the rancher realized, was something he had been missing for far too long. The next morning, the rancher woke to a soft glow of sunlight spilling over the pastures. For the first time in many years, he didn't feel the usual weight of solitude pressing on his chest. The traveler was already outside, moving among the animals with ease and confidence. They had become part of the rhythm of the ranch, almost like an extension of it. The rancher watched them quietly from the porch, feeling a mix of pride, relief, and something unfamiliar, anticipation. That day started like any other, with chores and care for the animals. But there was a sense of energy in the air, a feeling that something important was about to happen. The traveler approached him while he was checking the water troughs. "Do you think I'm ready?" they asked softly. The rancher paused, considering. "Ready for what?" he asked. "Pass." The traveler took a deep breath. "To stay. Permanently. to be a part of this ranch, not just as a helper, but as someone who shares this life with you. Inspiration. I'm willing to work, to learn, and to take responsibility. But I don't want to overstep. Pray. The rancher studied them carefully. He had spent years living alone, relying only on himself, trusting only his animals. Letting someone in permanently was not a small decision. But as he looked at the traveler, honest, capable, kind, and determined, he realized that they had already earned that trust. It won't be easy, he said finally. This life demands patience, hard work, and respect.
But you've proven yourself. You've earned it.
The traveler's eyes lit up with relief and happiness. They nodded eagerly. Brask, thank you. I won't let you down. From that moment, their relationship changed. But it was no longer just about temporary help or learning the chores. It was about partnership, companionship, and shared responsibility. The rancher felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. That afternoon, a problem arose that tested their partnership more than any lesson or chore had before. A sudden windstorm swept across the ranch, rattling the barns, tossing hay bales, and bending the trees. One of the fences had been weakened by a hidden crack, and the storm threatened to break it entirely. If the fence failed, the cattle could escape, causing chaos and danger.
The rancher shouted for the traveler to help, and together they ran to the fence. Working side by side, they secured the posts, tightened the ropes, and guided the panicked animals away from the damaged section.
Rain started falling, soaking them to the bone.
But they didn't stop!
The traveler had learned quickly to anticipate the needs of the ranch and the animals, and their calm, quick thinking was invaluable.
After hours of effort, the fence held, the animals were safe, and the storm began to pass.
Gasped. They both sat on a fallen log, dripping wet but smiling. The rancher looked at the traveler and said quietly, "You handled that well. Better than I expected. You've become more than just help. You're part of this place now." The traveler's smile widened. "I've never felt this way before. I feel like I belong." The rancher nodded, a rare warmth filling his chest. He had spent years alone, but now he realized that life was richer when shared with someone trustworthy and capable. The following days brought calm and routine, but also moments of subtle joy and connection. The traveler had become skilled in every aspect of ranch life, feeding the animals, tending the fences, riding the horses, and even noticing small changes in the land that the rancher had taken years to see. Together they worked, laughed, and shared stories, each learning from the other. The rancher taught patience, responsibility, and observation, while the traveler brought energy, curiosity, and new perspectives that brightened his daily life. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the fields in gold and crimson, the traveler suggested a small project. "What if we plant a garden?" they asked. "Fresh vegetables, herbs, maybe even some flowers. It could make the ranch even better, and we could share the harvest." The rancher raised an eyebrow but smiled. It was a simple idea, but it carried a deeper meaning: growth, life, and a shared future. "All right," he said, "let's do it." Over the next few weeks, they worked together on the garden. They tilled the soil, planted seeds, watered carefully, and watched as tiny sprouts began to appear. The process was slow, sometimes frustrating, but also rewarding. The rancher found himself enjoying the traveler's company more than he had expected, appreciating their laughter, suggestions, and enthusiasm. He realized that this partnership was not just about help. It was about connection, shared effort, and mutual respect. One day, while checking the animals near the creek, the traveler pointed out a small problem. "The stream is carrying debris from upstream," they said.
If we don't clear it, it could overflow and damage the pasture. Without hesitation, the rancher and the traveler worked together, clearing branches and rocks, redirecting the water flow, and protecting the fields.
The travelers' attentiveness and initiative impressed the rancher deeply. They were no longer a newcomer learning the ropes. They were an essential part of the ranch's life. As summer approached, the rancher realized how much the traveler had changed his life. The days were brighter, the work lighter with shared effort, and the quiet evenings on the porch were filled with conversation, laughter, and even gentle teasing. He found himself looking forward to the traveler's presence, appreciating the companionship he had once resisted. For the first time in decades, he felt a sense of warmth, hope, and belonging. Then, one afternoon, a neighbor from the nearby town stopped by. He was surprised to see another person on the ranch. "I didn't expect anyone else to be living here," the neighbor said. The rancher nodded. "This is the new helper. They've proven themselves capable, honest, and trustworthy. They're staying." The traveler waved politely, and the neighbor smiled. The rancher realized that sharing his life with someone did not diminish it. It expanded it. As the days turned into weeks, the traveler became indispensable. They had learned every skill, earned the respect of the animals, and earned a place in the rancher's heart. The bond between them grew stronger with every shared task, every problem solved, and every quiet evening watching the sun set together. The rancher had once believed he could live happily alone, but now he understood that life was richer when shared with someone who cared as deeply as he did. One evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, the traveler turned to the rancher. "I've learned so much from you," they said softly. "Not just about ranch work, but about life, patience, and responsibility. I feel like this place is home now. Thank you for trusting me." The rancher felt a lump in his throat. He had never been good at expressing emotions, but he found the words. "You've earned it," he said. "More than I expected." Psh! "I never thought I'd welcome someone into this life permanently, but now I can't imagine it any other way." From that moment on, the ranch was no longer just the rancher's life. It was theirs, shared equally. The animals, the land, and the work were still challenging, but they faced it together. The garden grew, the fences stayed strong, and the animals thrived under their combined care. Every day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments of quiet joy. Winter arrived, as it always did, with snow covering the fields and frost painting the windows. Brash. The rancher and the traveler worked side by side, feeding the animals, clearing paths, and repairing barns. The harsh weather no longer felt as daunting because they faced it together. The traveler's presence made the cold nights warmer, the long workdays lighter, and the quiet moments more meaningful. The rancher handed the traveler a mug of hot cocoa, a rare treat in the rancher's simple life. "You've changed this place," he said quietly, "but not just the work, but everything. You've brought life, energy, and companionship."
I can't imagine going back to how it was before. The traveler smiled warmly. "And you've taught me more than I could have ever learned anywhere else."
"I feel like this is home, and you've given me that." As the night deepened, the rancher realized how much his life had transformed. He had started as a solitary man, content but isolated, living for the animals and the land. Now he had a partner, a friend, and someone he trusted completely. The ranch, which had once been a place of routine and labor, had become a home filled with laughter, shared effort, and hope. The next morning the sun rose over the snow-covered fields, glinting off the frost and illuminating the beauty of the ranch. The travelers stepped outside first, checking on the animals and smiling as they moved freely in the fields. The rancher followed, feeling a deep contentment. Life was still work, still challenges, but now it was shared. And shared life, he realized, was far more rewarding than solitude could ever be. Together they walked through the pastures, checking fences, feeding the animals, and planning for the days ahead. The rancher looked at the traveler and felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had come unexpectedly, offered nothing but honesty and effort, and had changed his life completely. He no longer feared companionship, no longer dreaded sharing his world. Instead, he embraced it fully, ready to face whatever challenges and joys the future would bring, together. The rancher smiled quietly, watching the traveler move among the animals, confident, skilled, and happy. He realized that life was not just about surviving or managing the land. It was about sharing it with someone who cared, someone who could work alongside him, and someone who had become family in every sense of the word. And in that realization, he found a peace and joy he had never known before.